Good afternoon. I'm Eunha Claire Kim, and Director of Government and Corporate Affairs at AMCHAM. Welcome to today's Election Spotlight, AMCHAM Special Dialogue with Presidential Candidate Lee Jun-seok. With the Korean presidential election now just 12 days away, we are honored to host candidate Lee of the Reform Party. At a time of increasing geopolitical and economic uncertainty, this election carries far-reaching implications for Korea's future and for the strength and stability of U.S.-ROK alliance. Now I'd like to invite James Kim, Chairman and CEO of AMCHAM, to deliver his welcome remarks. Please join me in welcoming him to the stage.
Good afternoon. What a fantastic turnout today. So let me formally welcome all of you to AMCHAM's special dialogue with presidential candidate Lee Jun-seok of the Reform Party. It's a great pleasure for me to host him. It was just yesterday that we spent some time together, and I'm very glad he could show up today because his schedule is really, really tight. Just a few days ago, as a lot of you know, AMCHAM hosted the People Power Party's presidential candidate, Kim Moon-soo. And I think we all learned a lot about his vision and policies as it relates to especially U.S.-Korea dynamics. So I'm hopeful that we're going to learn a lot more about candidate Lee's philosophy and why he thinks he's a great, great candidate. I've had the privilege of knowing candidate Lee since his appointment as the leader of the People Power Party in 2021. His political acumen, exceptional intellect, and global perspective make him an invaluable asset to Korea. Plus, I think we all agree he has phenomenal communication skills. Today, Korea stands at a critical crossroad, facing complex political and economic challenges, both domestically and globally. The upcoming presidential election, less than 2 weeks away, is going to be very, very pivotal. Just last Friday, I was in Jeju to meet with the U.S. Trade Representative, Ambassador Jameson Greer. As we all know, he is a very, very important figure because of all the discussions underway. And at that meeting, I highlighted to Ambassador Greer that Korea is the #1 foreign direct investor in the United States. We also highlighted AMCHAM's efforts to minimize some of the barriers that make it difficult for U.S. companies to operate here in Korea. And as I discussed with candidate Lee, we've had several discussions the past 1 year, and he's been very, very gracious and open to us. We talked about AMCHAM's Business Environment Insight Report, which I'm sure you are aware of. It identifies 66 regulatory challenges across 12 industries, including pharma, digital economy, that limit market opportunities for U.S. companies. And I do believe that candidate Lee shares many of our concerns, and he has agreed in the meetings we've had to help us really reverse the course on some of those challenges. And also, don't forget our recent AMCHAM survey, which indicates that Korea is still the second most desirable country in Asia to set up a regional headquarters. And if you take a look at the numbers that I always talk about, 5,000 multinational companies headquartered in Singapore, 1,400 in Hong Kong, 900 in Shanghai. We have less than 100 in Korea for a great country like what we have. So we're hopeful that candidate Lee can also help improve that number, because I personally believe that the number goes from 100 multinational companies in Korea to 1,000. And that's what every candidate, I believe, should strive for. So looking ahead, Korea is preparing to host the APEC 2025 CEO Summit. And I hope that that venue would make it an ideal place to showcase Korea again. And again, I'm very thankful that we have candidate Lee here with us today. So without further delay, let me give him a proper introduction, because I really believe that he deserves this kind of an introduction. So candidate Lee is the official nominee of the Reform Party in Korea's 21st presidential election. He first entered politics as a member of the Executive Leadership Council of the Conservative Party, becoming the youngest person to serve on the council at age just 26. In June 2011, he made history when he was elected as the leader of the People Power Party, becoming the youngest individual to lead South Korea's main conservative party. Under his leadership, the party secured major victories in both the 2022 presidential and local elections. In January of 2024, candidate Lee founded the Reform Party, offering a bold, conservative alternative to Korean voters. And just a few months later, April 2024, he won a surprising and historic victory in the general election, becoming only the third party candidate to win a constituent seat, representing Hwasong in Gyeonggi Province, defeating both the PPP and the Democratic Party. Candidate Lee's platform has focused on streamlining government and positioning Korea as a global tech leader through major investments in AI, science, and talent development. He studied in the U.S. He's a graduate of Harvard University, where he earned a bachelor's degree in both computer science and economics. And prior to his political career, he also led a nonprofit organization focused on providing educational support for underprivileged students. Now, at 40 years old, a year ago, he couldn't even run for this office. But now that he is officially legal of age, he is now the youngest presidential candidate in Korean history. And I think that he offers a fresh and a dynamic vision for Korea. I believe that he will be very good for U.S.-Korea relations. But I also want to let you know that AMCHAM is a non-political, non-partisan organization. So without further delay, let me ask candidate Lee Jun-seok to come on stage. Here make a statement, and then I'll do a fireside chat with him. And please have some questions. In fact, he's one of the only candidates that I've talked to who is willing, ready, and able to accept questions on a format like this. So he's got a lot of courage, okay? So let's see how much courage you have. Come on up.
Thank you for inviting me to this important event today. I'm going to start my keynote speech here, and I'm going to do it in English. Yeah. So, good afternoon, everyone. It is a true pleasure to be here with you, with all of you today. And to the many distinguished leaders who represent American companies operating in Korea, thank you. You're not just guests in our country. You are essential partners in our economy, our innovation, and our future. We're living in a time of extraordinary transformation. Technologies are like artificial intelligence, clean energy, next-generation semiconductors, and digital platforms are reshaping the global order. And the nations that lead in innovation will shape the future of prosperity and security. Korea fully intends to be one of those nations, but we know we cannot do it alone. We need partners who share our values and our vision. Partners like you, leaders who are already building, hiring, and investing here in Korea. What we now need to do is to make it easier, faster, and more predictable for you to grow here. Let me begin with a very clear commitment. Korea will be a business-friendly country without compromise. I know that many of you have faced challenges of operating in Korea. You've dealt with regulatory complexity, policy uncertainty, and frustrating delays. And yet, you've stayed. You've helped Korea create jobs, introduce best practices, and integrate into the global economy. For that, we are deeply grateful. But gratitude is not enough. It's time for reform. We will remove outdated regulations that serve no public good. We will end overregulation, rooted in the fear of unfamiliarity with new technology. And we will ensure that your operations in Korea are guided by predictable rules and transparent processes and fair treatment. We will not allow the pace of government to hold back the pace of innovation. And this isn't just about removing risks. It's about unlocking opportunities here in Korea. We want Korea to become a launchpad for global ideas, not just a market for global products. If your company can build an AI solution, a digital payment system, or clean tech platform in San Jose or Austin, you should be able to build it in Seoul or Pangyo with the same freedom and the same support. To make that possible, we are redesigning our approaches to industrial policies. We are moving from top-down control to bottom-up innovation. That means faster approvals, more flexible labor and immigration policies, and better access to R&D, incentives, and infrastructure. It also means reaffirming one of our core values, freedom on the open internet. Korea believes in a digital space that is free, open, and global. We oppose protectionist data walls, digital censorship, and overreach in the name of security. We support ethical AI governance, open standards, and global data cooperation. In short, Korea will be a champion of digital freedom in a world that increasingly needs it. Now, I also want to address an issue that many of you have raised over the years, policy whiplash. The experience of sudden regulatory changes that disrupt long-term planning is real, it's damaging, and we are determined to end it. We are introducing institutional safeguards for policy stability, such as independent regulatory review boards, economic impact assessments for major laws, and dispute resolution mechanisms that protect foreign investors. When you make a long-term commitment to Korea, you deserve a government that keeps its word, not one that shifts with every headline. Let me also take a moment to acknowledge what is already working well, our deep cooperation in semiconductors and batteries. American and Korean companies have forged extraordinary partnerships in these sectors, and Korean firms have made substantial investments in the United States, from fabs in Texas and Arizona to battery plants in Georgia and Michigan. But true partnership must be mutual, I think. And we know that we now ask that American companies expand their investments here in Korea, especially in areas where the next wave of transformation is taking place. That includes digital infrastructure, particularly data centers, cloud facilities, and AI training hubs. Data is the oil of the modern economy, I think. And Korea is one of the best places in the world to refine it. We offer world-class connectivity and a highly educated workforce and geopolitical stability, of course, and growing renewable energy capacity. We are also committed to removing regulatory hurdles that slow down digital infrastructure projects. If you're looking for the right place to build your next data center or digital innovation base in Asia, we want Korea to be your first choice, not your backup plan. You already know that this market, if you know your people, our institutions, and our strengths. So now we ask that you help us take the next step from a strong partner to strategic leader in global digital economy. Korea is ready, and our people are ready, and I believe this moment is ready. Because the 20th century was defined by physical infrastructure, by steel, oil, and highways. But the 21st century will be defined by digital infrastructure and by trust and by values. Let us make sure that the values we share, freedom, openness, and innovation, are embedded into the technologies and systems that shape tomorrow. Let us lead together, not just in commerce, but in principles. Let's build together not just factories, but the foundation for the next digital age. Thank you once again for everything you do here in Korea, and thank you for helping us build a better future together.
Thank you very much, candidate Lee Jun-seok, for sharing your inspiring vision for Korea as a digital hub. We'll now transition to the next segment of today's program, of the Fireside Chat. James Kim will moderate this session for next 40 minutes or so, and following the discussion, candidate Lee may take a few questions from the audience.
So thank you so much for the right greeting today, especially in English. You might be the first and only Korean government official to do this in English, so thank you. All right. Also, I don't know if you know, but I'm a lot older than candidate Lee, but he calls me James. So this is also another specialty.
Well, that is why some people call me by the name of Sagaji. But James is very open to these kinds of things like this, so that's why I admire him, you know.
But it also shows you that he is truly global. So I think that as he, navigates the different meetings, it's so much more effective to do it in this format that we're talking about. So let me cut to the chase and ask you some tough questions. Questions that I'm sure a lot of us are very, very interested in. So we're now less than 2 weeks away. It obviously shows candidate Lee Jun-seok with a very, very healthy lead, according to a lot of polls. But I do see that the polls are tightening. One I just read this morning was that Lee Jun-seok has like a 46, 47% rating. And then we have Kim Moon-soo at 41, 42, and you having the balance. So my question is, given the gap, what is your winning strategy for yourself and the Reform Party?
I thought AMCHAM was non-political. Well, just let out my tactics then. So Lee Jae-myung now somewhere at 46 or 45 or somewhere between that, and Kim Moon-soo in some polls along 30 or 40. Me at 10 or 11 recently. Well, but as you all know, it's like in Korea, politics is mainly divided into two factions. First, the conservatives, and the other, the progressives. And Lee Jae-myung is like the sole candidate for the progressive sector. And by mentioning that he now has a 46% popular rating, means that he's not above 50 yet, which means that changes can be made. And it's like I feel like it's a semifinal between me and Kim Moon-soo as of now. And this doesn't really mean that I'm going to unify with Kim Moon-soo to fight against Lee Jae-myung, but definitely this semifinal is going to go on for another week, and the voters will choose who is like the candidate to confront Lee Jae-myung, finally. So I think there's going to be a big shift in popular ratings within the next week or 10 days. And then, magic might happen after that. But yeah, this is what I experienced in the recent general election when I ran for the district in Dongtan, my district. So the numbers that showed till the blackout period for the public poll were like at 40% for the DP candidate and 20% for the PPP candidate and another 20% for me. And the result was, of course, the DP candidate went down to 39, and the PPP candidate fell down to 17, and I got 42, and it was a magic that happened within the 6 or 7 days of period of the blackout period. So I'm kind of looking for the same thing here,
Of course.
but the numbers might be a little different, but we are looking at the similar tactic and the model here.
And also, I think a lot of people feel like you've done an amazing job in the first debate. In fact, candidate Kim Moon-soo called you the MVP of that debate. So again, it kind of validates your strength as a candidate so far. But at the same time, I believe that the PPP party has talked about this Big Ten strategy. And I'm sure it's not new news that they want to get you into the fold. You just kind of said that you are not really entertaining that at this time. But can you be a little bit more clear about that strategy?
So here's the thing. So after Park Geun-hye's impeachment in 2017, so the PPP, or the conservative faction, lost the election like 4 times or 5 times in a row. And in year 2021, when Kim Jong-un and I became the leaders for the party, we had like a 3 winning streak, you know. And after PPP kicking me out and Kim Jong-un, they're in a losing streak right now. And so they kind of tries to defy the method of winning recently. And the key method of winning for the Conservative Party is to try to unify the younger generation of Korea, who tend to be more conservative, and the older generation, who tend to be more conservative. But here's a little difference here. The younger generation in Korea, in their 20s and 30s, they claim themselves to be conservatives, but in a different manner than what the people of age 60s and older are thinking, you know? So the people of age 60s or older, they are conservative because of traditional and historical reasons. They always mention how communism can be a threat to us. But whereas like people in their 20s and 30s, they are conservatives because they value freedom and openness more than the people in the 40s and 50s. So it's really hard for like a political tactician to try to bind these 2 different conservatives into one. So that's the thing I and like Mr. Kim Jong-un kind of focused for 2 years between year 2021 and 2022. Back then we had a strategy, but now the conservative faction lacks the strategy. And so since they gave up on this working tactic, they now rely on just trying to sum up all conservatives into one big tent. But this proved to be wrong in 2020's general election when Mr. Hwang Kyo-won tried to bring everybody into this big tent and try to line them up under one flag, and it totally failed. They lost the election by 180 to 120 in that election. So I am personally against this idea of Big Ten because this is not going to work as it didn't in 2020. The only way this election can be, the flow of polls can change is that only if we choose to surprise the public, which means that, it's kind of hard to say, but when I become the main candidate to confront Lee Jun-seok, that will be the place when the Korean public is going to be surprised and try to bring their magic in. You know? So that could be the only tactic, I think, that can make changes to this, what it seems to be a landslide victory for Lee Jun-seok. Yeah.
So in other words, you want the big tent to come under you, right?
I'm always happy to accept Kim Woo-soo under my tent.
But now that we covered some political questions, because that's like the elephant in the room. So let's get down to really the U.S.-Korea,
sure.
the business side of the equation. We're all aware that the Trump administration and the Korean government are engaged in major tariff negotiations, which is one of the reasons why Ambassador Jameson Greer came to Korea last week. So if you were elected president, how would your approach be with President Trump? Do you think you'd be effective with him? And do you think you can be a better negotiator than Lee Jae-myung or Kim Min-soo?
Well, there's been a date set, to July 8th or like that, when the Trump administration wants this trade deal to be done. But I personally think that we need more time because, the election ends in June 3rd, and inauguration, you need to go through a lot of processes. So Korea is going to try to seek more time in this negotiation. And of course, already, President Trump is deviating from his original plans, as we can see, because, tariffs on U.S. customers that we need to see, tariffs are not on, exporting companies. Tariffs are on the U.S. customers, and U.S. customers are experiencing a lot of burdens already. And definitely, President Trump will also need some time to realign his policies to carry out a decent negotiation with Korea. And of course, we were so surprised how President Trump imposed so much tariffs on, say, manufacturing stations of Korea, like Vietnam and those countries. I know Vietnam has been used as a manufacturing station for Chinese companies also to circumvent their regulations and their tariff areas. But hey, companies in Korea, in Vietnam, Korean companies in Vietnam are abiding by the U.S. policies, and they should not be regulated by the same ruler here as the Chinese manufacturing companies there. So, I mean, these details have to be deeply taken care of in this situation, and we need some time to lay out these kind of agendas on our table. So I'm definitely going to ask more time.
So, when I did this fireside chat with candidate Kim Moon-soo, one thing that was very clear was he is really pro-America. He said he'll go see President Trump in June. And he felt that Korea really, really needs the United States. And he made it very, very firm. Because we haven't talked to candidate Lee Jun-seok about it specifically, I'm sure he's also saying let's delay. So is your strategy the same as Lee Jun-seok?
Well, we should definitely not hurry here. I already mentioned how President Trump lowering the numbers for China already has made him lose faces. So we definitely need to come up with a single meeting that really can suffice our mutual needs. So definitely in June, I think we're going to definitely need to take some time. Of course, there are going to be talks between the actual people who carry out the negotiations, but summit meetings or summit negotiation have to take some time, I think.
Right.
So that's the kind of difference I have here. Yeah.
So let's talk about some of your economic pledges. You talked about small government initiative, right? Support for reshoring manufacturing back here to Korea. They seem very similar to President Trump's America First policies. So in the face of intensifying global competition, what is your strategy for strengthening global competition?
Well, one of the key things I mentioned was we're going to try to set a benchmark country for each industry here in Korea. Say I mentioned in my keynote speech that any business that can be done in San Jose or in Texas, Austin, same kind of business should be allowed in Seoul or Pangyo. Because, we cannot adjust to, Korean companies or American companies cannot adjust to double standards, in those countries. So we will have to try to keep it level between the countries, which means that Korean companies can open and freely go to the U.S. with their same business model they created in Korea. And of course, companies in the U.S. should easily bring their business model in Korea to suffice more customers here in Korea. So deregulation and try to bridge the gap between the two countries, that will be my main promises to the business sector.
And remember the report we talked about, there are 66 regulatory challenges here in Korea that U.S. companies have talked to us about.
And you mentioned labor challenges,
yes.
Of course, yeah.
And I want to kind of go a little bit deeper into every one of these challenges, right? Sure. So let's take a look at labor, for example. Everyone knows that when you operate a business here in Korea, there's a lot of inflexibility. Simply put, the way businesses should work is if businesses are going well, you should hire as many people as possible.
Sure.
When things slow down, you need some room to reduce, minimize the workforce. In a place like Korea, that's not possible. So what is your magic answer to get that resolved?
Well, definitely regulations on workforce and labor, they should be loosened a little. At the same time, I announced how I'm going to leave some room for regional governments to choose the minimum wage conditions for workers. So I mentioned in the recent debate, I mentioned how Texas just has the federal minimum wage limit and not the state minimum wage limit. and how Texas and Florida are so close, but at the same time, Texas had lower minimum wage, but at the same time, Texas had higher average or mean hourly wage than Florida, which means that lower minimum wage doesn't necessarily mean that lower average income. So I'm going to try to let the Korean regional governments to decide on their minimum wage. I'm going to give them a 30% positive or negative margin in the national set minimum wage. So by doing that, we're going to provide companies with more option for the wage they give to their workers. That could be one thing. And of course, well, name me a few. Then
Yeah, but again, I think wage is one aspect, but the one that American companies and other foreign companies face is really about the availability to
layoffs and
hire and reduce. And to be honest with you, even in the U.S., you have regulations when it comes to let's say, layoffs in certain states. And nobody likes to lay off anybody. But the very fact you have that as an option if and when businesses do turn south. What is your perspective
Well, it's
on
a very
that?
sensitive thing here in Korea, and I'm trying to be honest here.
Of course.
I'm not brave enough to say that we're going to allow easier layoffs here, but definitely I'm going to work on it and see what other options are possible.
Right.
Yeah.
The second one has to do with this thing called CEO risk. As you and I talked about before, here in Korea, the CEO of a company is personally liable both criminally and professionally for anything that happens under their watch.
Right.
Do you have an insight or perspective on that?
Well, it's really something that has to be deregulated, for like a CEO or like an important people in important position to take responsibility for what happens in their factories, because I mean they should definitely invest more and more to make their workers work in a safer environment. That's something that everyone wants to do here, but not criminalize them for not predicting everything, So that's the kind of changes that I'm trying to bring in here. Maybe Kim Moon-soo and I have similar senses on this. Definitely the conservative fiction is willing to remove such regulation on how to impose more burdens on CEOs to keep track of everything and taking responsibility of everything,
And I think nobody argues that if the CEO is personally doing that acting, this person should be criminalized. But this is really for aspects where the CEO really, wasn't that involved with that situation. And the fact that they are personally liable for what happens on the watch, I think is a challenge that people do see.
Sure, because so what we can see here in Korea is that once you become a big entrepreneur, that you choose to just remove yourself from the position of CEO and just put someone else on the CEO's position just to take the burdens. You still sit in the back and you control everything, but you just not want to be the CEO. That's the kind of thing that's really awkward here in Korea. So, yeah.
So we do hope that that's a second major challenge that we see. And third has to do with consistency of taxation too. Because we have so many changes that occur, companies have a difficult time planning for it. And also the tax here are a lot higher than our competition.
Right.
So when we look at companies setting up regional headquarters,
Right.
and I gave you those numbers, 5,000 in Singapore versus 100 in Korea.
Yeah.
Is Singapore that much better than Korea? Right?
I think we can do much better.
Exactly.
Yeah.
And I think taxation is another one, both personal taxes and also corporate taxes. And that's the reason why these countries are able to attract a lot more investments.
So in the debates, I always mention, and I always ask the Korean public, do you know why Elon Musk had to move his headquarters for SpaceX from California to Texas? I think economy is something that's just like water, It always flows from somewhere higher to somewhere lower, which means somewhere places when the taxes are lower, the money will flow in that direction, of course. And at the same time, regulation is in a lower level, then it will, the companies and money will flow in that direction. So that's why I mentioned Texas in the recent debate. So one thing that I promised was that, like in Korea, we have a flat corporate tax rate for every region here in Korea. So in Korea now, if you run business and you earn profits, then you pay, say, 20% as corporate tax. And of the corporate tax, you pay 10% to the regional government. So that's the thing, that's the margin the regional government has. Which means that even if the regional government wants to lower taxes and trying to bring in more investors into their region, they have such a small margin for them. So they can only offer them, we're going to pay you back 10% of the corporate tax. That's not enough for investors to make choices, you know. So my promise was to try to cut the national corporate tax from 10 to 7 and give that margin of 3 to regional government, which means that the regional government can always choose to shrink that number down to 0, or if someone is just confident that they can raise the numbers to 6 or 7 and collect more taxes, just what New York is doing, you know. But if a regional government chooses to do what Texas is doing, they should be able to choose that direction at the same time. So by doing that, we can bring in more investors into Korea, of course, and we can bring more investors to regional sectors, you know, like we can make businesses move to the southern area of Korea, namely Gyeongsangdo and Jeollado. And those are the kinds of things I mentioned, how I can be business friendly and investor friendly by lowering those corporate taxes or bringing some sort of competition among the regional governments. Yeah.
I think those aspects are really welcome for a lot of the people who are interested in business here.
And of course, like everything else, you know, like corporate taxes and of course like electricity bills, and those numbers should be put into the chamber of competition, you know, like regions which have like nuclear reactors in their region, namely like Gyeongsangdo. They should be able to benefit from lower power bills, you know, and those acts are already passed in our National Assembly, and we want those to really benefit our investors who are trying to invest in our regional sectors. You know?
But just the word candidate Lee talked about, competition, is something we don't really hear a lot about from politicians.
Right.
But again, you know, I like competition. Korea should compete against Singapore, Hong Kong, to get more opportunities here. And that's how we win.
Right.
That's how we go from 100 to 1,000 multinational company headquarters here in Korea. So I hope that you could support that initiative.
Sure, definitely. I'm going to try to bring a lot of tax cuts on companies moving their Asia-Pacific headquarters to our so-called international cities like Songdo, or maybe our want-to-be financial capital, Busan, or those cities. If a company if a multinational chooses to move to Busan or Songdo, I'm definitely going to prize them with heavy tax cut.
You know, candidate Lee has been very bold and courageous to be here with us today.
Yeah.
Now I want to do something special, which is open up to the floor for some questions. This is a very special opportunity, so I'd like to get the first question from the audience, please.
Well, for the questions on the floor, I can do Korean or English.
Yes.
Yeah, whatever you choose to. Yeah.
Wonik. He is the CEO of Lockheed Martin, by the way, a major U.S. aerospace company. Mic, please. Oh, it's coming.
Thank you very much for your exceptional insights and time with us. I'm again Wonik Lee, head of country Lockheed Martin Corporation. If you make the president of Korea, what could be your national security policy toward the U.S. and that for the foreign relations between China and the U.S.?
Well, I'm definitely going to make the trilateral relationship between Korea and U.S. and Japan more stronger and more stable. And at the same time, I'm not going to try to confront China or say bad things about them or anything like that. But I want China to stay in the order of, say, the international community. And at the same time, I want peace in the Taiwan Strait. So if China chooses to do anything different and try to change the security order of the East Asian region, then Korea will definitely voice up to stop that. But I'm not going to be too aggressive to say anything in front to be bold to China or to provoke on them or anything like that. But definitely, we support stability in the region. At the same time, we are going to use the trilateral relationship between Korea, U.S., and Japan as a key method to that.
Thank you, Your Excellency.
Chen Si.
Thanks, candidate Lee. James mentioned a little bit about,
And by the way, Chen Si is the CEO of Inspire, the largest entertainment resort in South Korea. Many
You're
thousands
resort
of
in
jobs.
Songdo, right?
Yes,
Yeah,
yes.
I've been there, yeah.
Oh, you have?
Yeah, I've been there once, yeah.
Thank you.
Yeah.
No, I just want to talk about President Trump, and obviously that's a critical relationship, and if you are elected president, you're much younger than him, and you know how volatile he is, his style. And when we met with candidate Kim, he was very positive about President Trump and called him a great golfer, etc. What would be the most effective method managing him, in your mind, for the benefit of Korea?
Well, I'm not going to make it too public, my tactics, but I believe that the economics that we learned in Harvard and economics that they learned in UPenn are not that different, So maybe we're going to be regional, and say I'm going to just try to convince him with some basic principles that free and open trade can be beneficial to both countries, and at the same time, tariff barriers that cannot be the terminal solution for, say, our stances against China or other countries. So I'm just going to try to tell him how Korea plays so much role in aligning ourselves with the security interests of the United States. Namely, we fought in Vietnam, and we supported the war in Iraq. We supported the war in Afghanistan. Of course, we are being helpful in Ukraine also. So it will be very beneficial for President Trump to keep our ally stronger and stronger. And there are a lot of things I can convince President Trump on, I think. So I'm definitely going to try to approach him in a decent manner and try to tell him that, President Trump has been doing some different things to Canada and Mexico, as we can see. They are the strongest neighboring states and allies to the United States, but it wasn't that successful, putting more pressure on them. But to Korea, this whole thing has been postponed for a while because of the martial law declaration and this thing. So President Trump definitely, I think, updated his tactics as of now. So I'm going to try to be more helpful to him. At the same time, he can show us his new tactic, maybe. Yeah, I really look forward to meet him.
Do you think you get along with President Trump?
Well. So the thing here in Korea, if anything we struggle in the area of politics, we ask the guy on the other side of the table, say, let's go and have a drink, but he doesn't drink, so I'm not sure if I can come up with a good tactic with him, but he seems to be very reasonable when he's on the table, so I think I'm going to try to work with our MOFAR and try to find out a decent tactic to deal with him.
Because if I was President Trump, I would like talking to you.
Mm-hmm.
We can speak the same language.
Uh-huh.
You're very vibrant.
Uh-huh.
So I think that's an advantage you would have.
Well, I hope the Korean public sees the same thing as James does,
And again, we're non-political and non-partisan.
Right.
So I know...
Hi. So first of all, it's very impressive to see you make the speech in English and also have this dialogue. And in fact, actually, I took a small video and then shared with my leadership team who are mostly Korean. So hopefully that will help with your votes. So you spoke a lot about how the digital economy will be the next infrastructure and how Korea plays an important role. But myself, actually, being part of the pharmaceutical and medical device industry, I really believe that this is an area where U.S. and Korea can really benefit from a mutual relationship. And also it's an area where Korea has a lot of strength. You know that our medical institutions are world-class.
Right.
Our doctors are world-class in terms of their skills. And also we have a great manufacturing capability,
Right.
which plays a critical role when it comes to manufacturing of biosimilars or also medical devices for that matter. However, as you know, the dynamic in Korea is such that it's strictly governed by national health insurance,
Right,
which is beneficial for the citizens to provide health care at an affordable cost. However, that sometimes conflicts with the agenda to make this industry the next engine for growth. So if you could share your vision of how you would balance the needs for the citizens in terms of providing affordable health care, but also, how do you foster this sector as the next engine for growth for Korea?
Well, Korean public saw in the COVID-19 period saying that investing more in pharmaceutical industry is very important for national security and everything. So definitely, we should try to bring more investors to invest in pharmaceutical industry in Korea because Korea has an excellent environment for research, as you mentioned. And at the same time, National Health Service, they kind of act as a regulator in this sector, I know. But at the same time, innovation goes with money, I think. So, those efforts to bring in new medicine and new technologies into our healthcare services, those have to be paid, So I'm going to try to kind of convince the public saying that if we want innovation, we should be willing to pay more for those innovations. That's the kind of main thing that I'm going to tell the public about. At the same time, those opportunities you mentioned, like we have great medical institutions. We are collecting a lot of data from those medical institutions. I visited the research center, AI research center for LG recently, and I asked those people there, the researchers, if we are to collect data from the medical institutions and if we are to set up a marketplace for those data that we collect, is LG willing to pay, say, 100,000 K for a sample? And the people at the research center said, of course we are willing to pay that money. So in Korea, there are a lot of opportunities because we have really good medical system. We have a really digitalized medical record tracking system and those kind of things. And those benefits, those data can really benefit healthcare researches and, say, innovations worldwide, So, and definitely your company and all those pharmaceutical companies should seek those kind of opportunities here in Korea. And our government, if I get to be the president, will definitely support those kind of innovative approaches nationwide. So, yeah, I really think we have a great place to work together here in Korea. Yeah.
And President No runs Johnson & Johnson.
Mhm.
Besides Korea, he has a part of Asia, work under his umbrella as well.
Great.
Okay. But speaking on the medical side,
Yeah.
what is your strategy on the medical strike situation in Korea that have yet to be resolved?
It seems that a lot of the medical students and the doctors in Korea are currently supporting our party. It shows in the polls, and that is because we stuck to the principles. The principle here is that doctors should be, say, admired to some extent, saying that they are getting paid lower than the international standard. At the same time, they are working too hard to keep this system going on after these strikes. So we have support from them. So we're going to use that support as a key thing to get the negotiation back. And it will happen right after I inaugurate if I get to be the president. Yeah.
Okay. Yes, on the left-hand side.
Hello, my name is Jim Young-soo. I'm the CEO of the Penn Ventures, early-stage startup investor, and at the same time, we support Korean startups going to the global market. I think one of the main reasons you apply for this presidency is not just for our generation, it's for the next generation. As Mr. James Kim mentioned that we are competing to be a center of Asia, competing with Singapore and Hong Kong. This is my personal opinion. We failed to be a center of the finance, competing Singapore and Hong Kong, but we have a chance to be a center of the startup ecosystem, competing other regions. So what is your vision and plan to make Korea as a center of the startup ecosystem?
So when I talk to the tech giants, tech investors who are investing a lot in Israel, they would mention to me saying that, well, we invest in Israel because anything they invent or anything they make in Israel can be directly applied to the U.S. market. And that kind of struck me because we have a similar level of technology here in Korea, but the reason that similar thing does not happen in Pangyo is that because we have different standards of regulation between Korea and the United States, especially in payments and especially in crypto and all these subsectors, and we are experiencing different regulations among these two countries. So, as I mentioned, I'm going to try to set U.S. as a benchmark country for our IT industry. Anything you should be able to do in San Jose or in Austin or in any place in the U.S., you should be able to do the same thing here in Korea, in Pangyo, and in Seoul, in Tehran Valley. And so deregulation is the key thing here. And at the same time, by deregulation in, say, you mentioned how finance, Singapore and Hong Kong is ahead of us. In the world of crypto, say 5 or 6 years ago, Korea was a leading challenger in this sector of crypto, but we apply so many regulations that all the human resources and all crypto assets move to Singapore now. But I mentioned that in a recent interview with media saying we should try to remove all regulations on crypto except for KYC. That could be something that we can really focus on. We want to be the next Swiss bank of in crypto. You know how back in, say, 15th and 60s, Swiss bank, they chose to remove all regulations on their financial institutions, and they kind of did well in that area. Of course, they are in a different situation right now, but in crypto, definitely we have a chance here. Yeah. Well, KYC is important because we don't want money laundering and all these dark side of crypto happening in Korea. But at the same time, when we remove all these regulations, I think Korea can be the center of crypto researches again. I think so. Deregulation has to happen in a surprising manner, I think. Yeah.
And that's where you and President Trump have a lot in common as well.
Of course,
in the crypto strategy. We have time for maybe one last question.
Congratulations for running an excellent campaign so far. My name is Dong-Soo Chung. I used to head up Invest Korea, trying to bring foreign companies into Korea for 4 years from 2006 to 2010. Mm-hmm. When I first started on the job in 2006, the per capita income between Korea and Singapore was about similar. Now Singapore's per capita income is more than twice that of Korea's. And Singapore has come up in different contexts a number of times already in terms of number of foreign companies headquartered there, the startup ecosystem and whatnot. What do you think is the main difference between Korea and Singapore? In my opinion, the distinguishing factor is English. You are in a room full of people who are making good living partly because of their ability to speak English fluently. Now, as the digital age came, there was a term called digital divide. I think in Korea, there's English divide. Those who speak English well have, generally speaking, higher average income potential for the rest of their life. So parents spend millions of dollars of their private money investing in their children to speak English well. So what do you think about as an economic strategy for the country to adopt English as the official second language in Korea, just like Singapore and Hong Kong?
Well, I do agree that English proficiency takes some role in such a gap here between Korea and Singapore. But at the same time, today I saw a newspaper article saying that Google just launched its new Google Meet AI video conferencing, which adopts live translation between English and other languages. So I think the gap might narrow down a little more. But at the same time, it's really important to know other cultures and know other languages among Korean people. But people of age 20s and 30s in Korea recently, they have really high English proficiency recently. So I think it's going to get better and better. But I personally do agree that they should not rely on, say, private tutoring for those purposes because it costs a lot of money here in Korea. So I'm going to definitely try to bring in more effective school education to promote their or make them have better language proficiency, of course. And of course, so to be honest, I lived in Singapore from 1996 to 1997 because my father worked there for a year. So, well, the thing with Singapore is that it seems that it's open to everything, I think, because Korean, different from Korean younger generations, say, younger generation in Singapore, they know they have a small island as their territory. So they travel a lot to other countries, and they are very familiar with other people from other countries coming into their country as a workforce. So definitely the experience between the Korean young generation and the Singaporean young generation are different. But we can have our generation, younger generation, travel more and say work in other countries more and try to bring in those cultures to Korea. And I think, of course, I'm already in my 40s. People in the 20s and 30s have better environment for that. So things will change and get better over time, I think. But if I am to support them or promote them to do better in that sector, then I'll definitely put more money into that if I become the president.
Yeah. You know, I wish we could take more questions from the audience, but obviously, candidate Lee has a very tight schedule.
Yeah, I have my Facebook and Instagram and everything, so you can just text me or anything through that. Yeah.
But you know, candidate Lee, I thought today we had a fantastic session. Look how courageous and bold he is to really have this open mind to answer every question from the audience. Luckily, we didn't have any crazy questions, but I thought these were all fair, good questions, and I think the audience got to know a lot better about who you are. So we wish you a lot of success. And if there's anything we can do for you, please let us know.
Yep, and I thank non-political James that for this great opportunity here. And I promised him that if I get to be the president, then I'm gonna try to set this up as an yearly meeting between the president and the investors or entrepreneurs. And even so, James is going to lead the session.
But you know, in closing though, I do want to say this. You know, given his relative youth, he's going to be a major force in Korean politics for many years. So I'm so glad that you had a chance to get to know him a lot better now, and we're going to have a lot more engagements with him. So stay tuned. So thank you so much. Okay.
Thank
Bye-bye.
you.
Thank you very much, candidate Lee Jun-seok, for your very candid and engaging dialogue with AMCHAM. Shall we give him another warm round of applause? I'd like to sincerely thank the Reform Party and everyone for joining us today.